baby. Give it a baby. Ooh. Give it those. Give it those toes. Give it those toes. Give it your baby. Give it your baby. Give it your baby.
Hard to imagine how this child's death could be any more traumatic.
The 29-year-old father conducted multiple Google searches, including how do you know if
She didn't make a sound, no cry, no breath, no heartbeat. That's how the 911 call began. Not from a frantic neighbor, not from a stranger in the street, but from her father. His voice, calm, controlled, almost unnervingly steady. Inside a dark, cold apartment, no heat, no light, no running water, a 10-month-old baby girl lay still on a bare mattress. The air was heavy, quiet. There was no sign of a struggle, no obvious injury, yet something about it didn't fit. The bathroom water, untouched, her diaper, clean. The father's story, already starting to crack. As emergency crews fought to save her, he didn't move closer, didn't reach for her, didn't cry. He just stood there, watching, waiting, like a man who already knew the ending. Her name was Zara Lynn Scruggs. She was only days away from her first birthday. And what happened to her wasn't neglect. It wasn't a tragic accident. It was something far darker. A truth that would force prosecutors, detectives, and an entire community to ask, how could something so wrong hide in plain sight for so long? Before we go any further, I want to be clear. This story involves the loss of a child. We share it not to shock, but to raise awareness, to protect the innocent, and to remind each of us why speaking up matters. For those who have stood with us, thank you. Your comments, your shares, your voices have carried these stories further than we ever imagined. You're not just viewers, you're advocates. And if you're new here, welcome. Tell us where you're watching from, and if you believe in justice and the power of awareness, consider subscribing. Because every time you engage, you make sure this story and the lessons it carries are not forgotten. When we stay informed, we stay vigilant. And when we speak out, we give a voice to those who can't. Now let's go back to the day Zara smiled for the very last time. Zara Lynn Scruggs came into the world on December 1st, 2019. Her family called her Moo, a nickname born not from reason but from affection. The kind of name that slips into a home and stays there, stitched into baby blankets, whispered during bedtime, written on birthday cards. She was a spark in human form, wide-eyed, endlessly curious, with a smile that could change the feel of an entire room. Those who met her remember how she didn't just look at you. She studied you, as if trying to understand the world faster than her tiny years would allow. For her mother, Erica Scruggs, Zara wasn't just her child, she was her center. Every first was celebrated. First laugh, first wobbly step, first clumsy dance to music on the radio. Erica captured it all. Photos, videos, little notes in her phone, each moment a piece of a growing story she believed would unfold for decades to come. Zara's father, Austin Stevens, was also part of that story. At 29, he appeared steady and respectable. He coached the Lower Providence Warriors, a youth football team, and helped manage a construction business called Black Diamond Construction. He spoke with confidence, dressed sharply, and carried himself in a way that didn't invite suspicion. On paper, there was nothing to worry about. No arrests, no public red flags, no whisper of harm. To anyone looking in, Austin seemed like a capable co-parent, a father who could be trusted. When Erica and Austin's relationship ended, they agreed to co-parent without involving the courts. It was simple, familiar, and free from conflict. Zara lived with her mother full-time, but on some weekends, she went to stay with her father. It had always been smooth. No arguments, no police calls, no reason for anyone in Erica's family to think twice. When Austin arrived for pickups, Erica's father, Zara's grandfather, often greeted him at the door, sometimes with a handshake, sometimes with a smile. On this particular weekend, he placed Zara in her father's arms without hesitation. Austin had just moved into a new apartment in Lower Providence. He mentioned it wasn't fully set up yet. No heat, no electricity, no running water. But moving is messy, and temporary discomfort isn't unusual. He said it casually, like it was no big deal. And no one asked more questions. The handoff felt ordinary, the kind of moment you barely remember. In Erica's mind, her daughter was simply spending the night with her dad. In her parents' eyes, this was just another routine weekend between two adults who had found a way to get along. And in that space, silence disguised itself as safety. Arrangements like this are more common than most people realize. Families build them on trust, on years of history, on goodwill, on the unspoken belief that no parent could ever harm their child. And most of the time, that belief is right. But sometimes, it isn't. Because trust, left unexamined, can be dangerous. It can blind even the most watchful parent. Familiarity quiets our alarms. We stop looking for the cracks because we believe there aren't any. If you've ever shared custody or trusted someone else to care for your child, you know the feeling. That fragile balance between letting go and staying protective. What signs would make you pause? The cruel truth about hindsight is that it makes the ordinary moments feel heavier. You start replaying them, wondering if you missed something. The smiles, the goodbyes, the little exchanges you thought were unremarkable. And that's what makes Zara's story so difficult to hear. There were no sirens before it began, no warning shots, just the quiet comfort of thinking. Everything was fine, until it wasn't. October 3rd, 2020, a Saturday evening in Lower Providence Township, Pennsylvania. Austin Stevens had just moved into a modest apartment at 3400 Germantown Pike. No furniture, no heat, no hot water, no working electricity. The official reports later noted the temperature inside, a chilly 59 degrees. Still, despite those conditions, Austin kept his weekend plans with his 10-month-old daughter. That night, he arrived at Erica's parents' home. The handoff was ordinary, almost forgettable. No raised voices, no hesitation, no hint that anything was wrong. He didn't mention the state of his apartment, and no one asked. Zara was placed into her father's arms, and they drove away. To everyone watching, it looked like any other weekend between a father and his child. But within hours, that ordinary evening would become the focus of a forensic timeline so detailed, so telling, that it would raise more questions than answers. Between 9:27 p.m. and 10:22 p.m., investigators later discovered Austin was busy on his phone. Not just once, not briefly, for nearly an hour. His search history from that night showed chilling phrases. If baby stops breathing, what if you don't hear baby heartbeat? How do you know if a baby is dead? And yet, those weren't the only things he was doing. At the very same time, Austin was chatting on social media. Investigators would confirm he was messaging two different women, casually flirting, sending photos of himself, and carrying on conversations that had nothing to do with a small child just feet away from him. No mention of Zara. No sign of urgency. No request for help. The timing of these exchanges was striking. Messages to women sent within minutes of searching for emergency medical answers. He was switching between the two, as though the situation unfolding in his apartment and the one in his phone existed in separate worlds. At 10:40 p.m., Austin finally called 911. In the recorded call, he said Zara had slipped in the bathtub, hit her head, and was now unresponsive. He claimed he'd stepped out for just a moment, then found her in distress. Paramedics rushed to the scene, but what they found didn't match the story. The bathtub was bone dry. There was no evidence that a bath had been run at all. Zara was wearing a clean diaper and lying on a mattress in the cold, dim apartment. There was nothing about the space that felt like a place prepared for a child. No warmth, no toys, no sense of comfort. And then there was Austin's demeanor. First responders would later recall it as oddly neutral, not frantic, not defensive, just detached. He didn't rush forward to help, didn't try to explain. He simply stood there, watching as paramedics worked. Medical crews moved fast, following every protocol to stabilize her and prepare for immediate transport. But the situation was already critical. Later, when detectives reconstructed the timeline, one question kept surfacing. What was Austin doing during that lost hour before he called for help? Why had there been such a delay? And how could his casual online activity exist alongside the gravity of what was happening in the room with him? Those contradictions, between the physical evidence and his digital footprint, became the first building blocks of the investigation. They didn't yet tell the full story. but they pointed to something deeply troubling. The signs that something was wrong may have been there long before the phone ever rang for help. If there's one thing this case shows, it's that timing matters. And sometimes, the truth hides not in what someone says, but in the long, dangerous pause before they say anything at all. October 4th, 2020, just after midnight. At 12:12 a.m., hospital staff stopped their efforts. 10-month-old Zara Scruggs could no longer be revived. Her arrival had been urgent, doctors and nurses working in rapid, practiced rhythm, trying every possible intervention. But despite their skill, the outcome was final. The emergency room went still. And from that moment, the focus shifted from saving a life to understanding why it had been lost. The case moved swiftly into the hands of forensic experts. The Montgomery County Coroner's Office assigned Dr. Frederick Hellman, a veteran medical examiner known for his methodical, high-profile work. His task was clear: determine how and why Zara died. A full forensic examination was ordered. The results, later entered into the case file, were stark. Cause of death: blunt force trauma to the head. Manner of death: homicide. The findings alone were alarming, but they were only the beginning. Investigators began piecing together the puzzle from every angle. They secured a search warrant for Austin Stevens' phone, knowing it could be the most revealing witness in the case. What they found was a digital trail that not only confirmed earlier suspicions, but narrowed the timeline to the minute. The same troubling internet searches from the night before. If baby stops breathing? What if you don't hear baby heartbeat? How do you know if a baby is dead? Were there? But now, each query was tied to precise timestamps. Those timestamps told a disturbing story. While Zara's condition was worsening, Austin wasn't calling for help. He wasn't rushing to a neighbor's door. He wasn't reaching for family. Instead, he was alternating between searching urgent medical questions and exchanging casual, flirtatious messages with two different women on social media. This wasn't guesswork. The phone's own log files told the story second by second. There was no break in the conversations, no sign of panic in his words. While the searches suggested he understood something was seriously wrong, the messages showed a man behaving as if nothing was happening in the room beside him. The physical scene added more weight to the contradictions. Near Zara's sleeping area, investigators collected a diaper that raised immediate concern. It was sent for forensic testing. Reports later confirmed it contained biological material that became part of the official case record. That single piece of evidence shocked the investigators to the bone, and it also directly challenged Austin's claim that Zara had slipped in the bathtub. The tub had been dry. The statement didn't match the physical proof. By comparing the phone data, browser logs, and message history, detectives built a minute-by-minute reconstruction of the night. And in that reconstruction, one fact stood out above all others. Not once in that entire hour before calling 911 did Austin reach out to anyone for help. No call to a friend, no text to a family member. Nothing that resembled the actions of a parent in crisis. The only call for help came after the searches had been made and after precious time had already passed. Then came the detail that investigators would later describe as the turning point. A single line from one of his messages, sent right in the middle of that hour. It proved he was aware of his daughter's condition well before the emergency call. And yet, he kept messaging, kept flirting, kept acting as though nothing in his apartment was wrong. That one contradiction became the backbone of the case. A silent clock, counting the minutes between knowing and choosing not to act. October 6, 2020. Just 2 days after the events inside that apartment on Germantown Pike, Montgomery County detectives had spent those 48 hours working in overdrive, walking the scene, re-interviewing emergency responders, and dissecting every second of the digital trail pulled from Austin Stevens' phone. By that morning, they had what they needed. The decision was made. Austin Stevens was arrested. The charges were staggering: aggravated assault, involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, and endangering the welfare of a child. Authorities said the move came swiftly because the evidence was already painting a disturbing picture. Conflicting statements, a physical scene that didn't match the story, and a digital timeline that revealed far more than Stevens had ever admitted. He was processed at the Montgomery County Correctional Facility, and prosecutors immediately filed to have him held without release. The reasoning was simple: the seriousness of the charges, the weight of the evidence, and the danger they believed he posed. As the investigation deepened, so did the case against him. By December 1st, after final forensic reports were filed and Dr. Hellman's autopsy results were officially entered into the record, the charges escalated. Montgomery County District Attorney Kevin R. Steele announced the additions: first-degree murder, third-degree murder, and related criminal offenses. The prosecution team, First Assistant District Attorney Edward F. McCann and Assistant District Attorney Brianna Ringwood, prepared for trial, emphasizing to the press that the case was built on an unshakable timeline of evidence. Bail was set at $1 million. The court denied release. For them, this wasn't just about punishing a crime, it was about protecting the community. When the news broke, shock rippled through Lower Providence. To many, Stevens wasn't just another name in a headline. He had been a youth football coach, a businessman, someone people waved to in passing. Now the community was confronted with a truth they could hardly process. One of the most unexpected voices came from inside his own family, his mother. Speaking to local reporters, she didn't hesitate. "He is a monster. We do not support him. We are completely against what he did to my granddaughter." It was a rare and unflinching stance, a parent choosing justice for her granddaughter over loyalty to her son. Meanwhile, the community rallied. Friends, neighbors, and strangers from across the country stepped forward to support Zara's family. A GoFundMe was launched, raising over $46,000 in a matter of days. Messages of grief, outrage, and solidarity filled the page. When it came time to say goodbye, more than 500 people attended Zara's funeral. The service was quiet and deeply personal. Soft music, photographs of a smiling baby girl, and stories from those who loved her most. It was a reminder that even in tragedy, people will come together, not because they have to, but because they can't imagine doing anything less. This case was never just about court dates and charges. It became a wake-up call, proof that harm doesn't always come from the shadows. Sometimes it's carried in by someone you know, someone you've trusted. And when communities rally, it's not just to mourn the loss, it's to draw a line in the sand, to say, not here, not again. If you've ever seen your own community rise up in the face of tragedy, share it below. Because justice doesn't start in a courtroom, it starts with people paying attention and refusing to look away. October 13th, 2020, not even 2 weeks after his arrest, Austin Stevens was led into the courtroom for his preliminary hearing. This wasn't the trial. Not yet. The goal here was simpler, to show that the evidence was strong enough to proceed. The prosecution came prepared. They laid out the framework of their case, the digital records, every search term, every timestamp, the forensic findings, blunt force trauma, not an accident. The witness statements, each one pointing to contradictions between what Stevens said and what investigators saw. They introduced the judge to the timeline surrounding the emergency call, with search data pulled straight from Stevens' phone. Every click, every message, every moment of silence that had cost precious time. After reviewing it, the presiding judge agreed. The case would move forward to trial. But this wouldn't be a quick path to justice. The COVID-19 pandemic had slowed the entire court system. Hearings were spread out, juries were delayed, and for nearly a year and a half, the case sat in that limbo, waiting for its day in court. Finally, by March 2022, the trial began. The prosecution opened with a clear, deliberate strategy: show that Austin Stevens not only failed to act when he should have, but that his behavior before the 911 call proved he knew exactly what was happening. They walked the jury through the hours before Zara's death. The medical searches, the flirty social media messages, the long delay before seeking help. Every action was anchored in time. No speculation, just data. They called paramedics who described the cold, dim apartment and Stevens' eerily calm demeanor. Investigators detailed the inconsistencies in his story. Medical professionals testified to the severity of Zara's injuries. It was steady, methodical, and unshakable. The defense countered with a different narrative. They suggested the tragedy wasn't intentional, that Stevens had been confused, scared, unsure of what to do. They painted the delays as hesitation, born from panic, not indifference. But the prosecution's timeline told another story, one of repeated, conscious choices not to act. Choices documented in his own phone, down to the second. When closing arguments ended, the jury was sent to deliberate. The charges were as serious as they come: first-degree murder, involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, endangering the welfare of a child. Each required the jury to weigh intent, knowledge, and action. It didn't take long. After just 90 minutes, they returned guilty on all counts. Austin Stevens had nothing to say. He hadn't taken the stand. He refused to speak before sentencing. He sat still as the judge read the decision. Life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Courtroom observers noted he showed no visible emotion. Deputies let him out quietly. No appeal was filed. For those watching, this wasn't just the end of a trial. It was the confirmation of what they had suspected all along. Every log file, every forensic report, every unanswered minute. It had all been more than suspicion. It was evidence. And that evidence became accountability. Because justice doesn't only happen in a courtroom. It starts with people paying attention. And it lasts as long as we keep telling the stories that matter. In the months after the trial, there were no sweeping new laws, no bold legislative headlines. But something else happened. Something quieter, and in many ways, far more enduring. Parents began having conversations they'd never had before. Conversations about safety, about trust, about the kind of risks that rarely come with flashing warning lights. Zara's story, though devastating, reached far beyond court transcripts. It traveled in private messages between friends, in late-night talks around kitchen tables, in parenting forums where strangers opened up about their own fears. People weren't just asking, "What happened?" They were asking, "How do we make sure this never happens again?" Local parenting groups and child advocates began holding small gatherings, not to relive the case, but to use it as a starting point. They talked about custody agreements, about the dangerous comfort of "we've always done it this way," and how familiarity can disguise risk. One phrase surfaced again and again: invisible risk. When two parents share custody without court involvement, trust becomes the foundation. And most of the time that trust is well placed. But without oversight, without structure, without a clear record of who is responsible and when, problems can hide in plain sight. Zara's case pulled that reality into focus. Not for lawyers or lawmakers, but for everyday families who had always believed they were doing the right thing. The hashtag Justice for Zara began appearing online. It wasn't launched by a campaign or organized group. It simply grew. Parent to parent, neighbor to neighbor, stranger to stranger. Some posted in remembrance. Some shared stories of the small changes they'd made since hearing her story. Double-checking pickup arrangements, asking more questions, paying closer attention to who their children were with and how those moments felt. The impact wasn't loud, it was personal. Measured in private pauses, extra questions, and the moments when someone looked at a situation and asked, "Is this really okay?" There are lessons here. Simple ones, powerful ones. First, document custody agreements, even between people who once trusted each other completely. Not out of suspicion, but out of respect for clear boundaries. Second, observe, not with constant doubt, but with steady awareness. Changes in mood, unusual defensiveness, or a sudden disinterest in a child's routine can be early signs something is wrong. And third, keep open lines of communication with children in ways that make sense for their age. Even toddlers can express discomfort in their behavior, in their body language, in the way they react to certain people. The truth is, the most effective safeguards don't always come from courtrooms or policies. They come from people who stay alert, from communities that check in before a crisis takes root, from families willing to have hard conversations long before they think they need to. Zara's name is now more than a headline. It's a reminder that danger doesn't always look like danger, and that silence when something feels off can cost more than anyone is prepared to lose. Her legacy calls for vigilance, for accountability, for protecting children not just with love, but with structure, awareness, and the courage to act before hindsight is the only thing left. Because in the end, love alone isn't enough. What protects a child is attention, its boundaries, and it's the willingness to act when something doesn't feel right, no matter how small that feeling may seem. Zara's story isn't just about what happened inside one apartment on one night. It's about how something that looked ordinary, even safe, on the outside, was hiding choices that would change everything. It's about how harm can come from places no one suspects, from people no one ever questions. This case pulled back the curtain on a truth many don't want to face. Appearances can create a false sense of comfort. Silence, paired with misplaced trust, can hold the door open for tragedy. There were no glaring warning signs, no system alert, no official record pointing to what was coming, and that's exactly why her story cannot be forgotten. Today, Zara's name stands for more than a headline. It stands for awareness. It stands for every parent who pauses to double-check, every teacher who notices the small things, and every community that refuses to stay quiet when something feels off. Because the truth is, the most dangerous threats are often the quietest. Every guardian, every relative, every caregiver carries the same responsibility to notice, to act, to protect. Even when the danger isn't loud, obvious, or visible at all, your awareness could save a life. Be part of a community that speaks when others stay silent. If you've made it this far, leave a heart in the comments for Zara's memory and subscribe so we can keep telling the stories that matter. Because remembering her is one way we protect the next child.